Disclaimer: not everything is 100% accurate. Some dates for certain events are contradictory, even by Tolkien himself, left for interpretation or guess. Some events has been interpreted by myself, such as travel times, from where certain characters traveled, paths, etc. Details of considered not vital has been left out. Some details of found cool has been represented. In September of 3rd Age 3001, Bilbo threw a grand party for his 111th birthday, which happened to be shared with Frodo, that was long prepared. Bilbo had ordered presents from Erebor and Dale, and dwarves with long beards and deep hoods driving a wagon came to Hobbiton. Some of them stayed in Bag End for the following days doing preparations. Gandalf arrived with a cart over the Brandywine Bridge, through Bywater and reached Bag End. During the party, Bilbo did a vanishing act with his ring. After Bilbo's disappearance trick, he returned invisible to Bag End, while the dwarves were doing work in various rooms, packing and labeling Bilbo's farewell presents. Gandalf could see that Bilbo was very preoccupied with the ring. Such un-hobbit-like behavior aroused his suspicions. He convinced Bilbo to leave the ring for Frodo. He then emphatically warned Frodo not to use it. Gandalf had begun to suspect that the magic ring was indeed a ring of power. Bilbo left Bag End, heading east with the dwarves that were working on his farewell gifts. Keen now to find out more about Bilbo's ring, Gandalf said goodbye to Frodo, and left, deciding to resume his search for Gollum. For this he sought the help of Aragorn, and the Rangers of the North were put to guard the Shire more closely. A year prior of Gandalf reaching the Shire, in around the year 3000, Saruman uses the Palantir in Orthanc for the first time. He failed to realize that the stone of Minas Ithil, now known as Minas Morgul, was now in possession of Sauron in Mordor. Sauron uses the Ithil stone to bend the Orthanc stone to his will, and in extension Saruman himself. 3 years later, Gandalf returns to check on the Shire and Frodo and periodically returns to do so for the next 4 years. In 3009, Gandalf and Aragorn renews their search for Gollum. During the 8 years between 3009 and 3017, Gandalf and Aragorn searched for Gollum in the Vale of Anduin, Mirkwood, Rhovanion and even the outskirts of Mordor, but could not find him. At around this time, in an attempt to control Rohan, Saruman bought the allegiance of King Theoden's chief advisor, Grima, promising him the Lady Eowyn as a reward. Saruman puts Grima to work, acting as his spy and preventing Rohan from interfering with the growth of his Uruk High army. Grima not only reveals Rohan's secrets to Saruman, but weakens King Theoden with both words and with poison. Grima counseled King Theoden to do nothing about the rising army of Sauron. Going back to year 3009, as Gandalf and Aragorn sets out for the search, Gollum is captured in Mordor by Sauron, held captive and tortured for several years, being forced to reveal everything he knows about the ring. In 3017 he is set free, only to be caught by Aragorn at the skirts of the Dead Marshes. With Gollum he traveled through the northern Emyn Muil, to prevent being found by Sauron's spies, and crossed the Anduin at the Sarn Gabur. He traveled further north along the edges of Fangorn Forest and through Lothlorien, where the elves sent a message to Gandalf. He traveled alongside the Anduin to the north until he arrived at the Carrick. With the aid of the Beornings he crossed the Anduin with Gollum and entered Mirkwood. He took Gollum to Thranduil to be held captive. As Aragorn and Gollum reached the Carrick, and crossed the Anduin with the help of the Beornings, Gandalf entered Minas Tirith. Studying the records in Minas Tirith, he found the Scroll of Isildur, and pieced together the missing history of Bilbo's ring. It was indeed not only a ring of power, but the One Ring. The scroll was made by Isildur himself during his short time in Minas Tirith after the War of the Last Alliance between Second Age 3441 and Third Age 2. The scroll held Isildur's account of the gaining of the ring from Sauron and described the appearance of an inscription around the ring while it was still hot. The scroll was stored for millennia in the vaults of that city, and according to Gandalf it was probably forgotten after the time of the kings of Gondor, and nobody, except him and perhaps Saruman, had seen it. Gandalf heads west for the Shire to inform Frodo that this was indeed the One Ring, and on his way back he got word from the Galadrim that Aragorn had finally captured Gollum, and he went to Mirkwood to meet him. For days he interrogated him in order to verify what he already knew. A great fear came over him when he learned that Gollum had been to the Barad-dûr. Sauron had tortured Gollum and learned not only of the magic ring, but also the names Shire and Baggins. And the effects that Gandalf had seen on Gollum and Bilbo convinced him that the ring of the story was not one of the rings of power. It was the one ruling ring of Sauron. Gandalf now returned in haste to the Shire. Sometime during this year, Éomer became Third Marshal of the Riddermark. In October 3017, a mysterious messenger came from Mordor to Erebor to speak with King Dain, offering Sauron's friendship and to ask about hobbits. In return for information, Dain would be given the last 3 dwarf rings. Dain told him to give him time to think, and for many weeks he pondered, and the messenger would return many times. Dain sent Gloin and his son Gimli to Elrond for counsel, and to warn Bilbo of the enemy looking for him. Gandalf reached the Shire in April 12, 3018, and told Frodo about the Rings of Power, and proved to him that Bilbo's was the ancient One Ring which the dark power of Mordor is looking, and Frodo should leave as soon as possible. Gandalf also told Frodo that he gathered this information from the creature Gollum, to which Frodo exclaimed that he should have been killed. Gandalf speculated that perhaps Gollum would have a part to play before the end, and in any case, it was not for them to decide who should live and who should die. Gandalf suggested that he should take the ring to Rivendell soon, and Frodo decided to leave on his next birthday, pretending to be moving to Buckland, to which Gandalf agreed. He stayed in the Shire for over 2 months, during which, on the 1st of May he went to Sarn Ford and met again Aragorn, informing him of Frodo's plans. Gandalf heard disturbing news about war in Gondor and a black shadow. He decided to leave for the south and left Frodo, promising to return for his birthday farewell party in autumn, so that they would go to Rivendell together. With Gollum captured by Aragorn, Sauron was concerned. He had hoped Gollum's release would have led him to the One Ring. Sauron, now being unable to recapture Gollum, took another route, to search for the halflings, who he had found had the ring. Gollum had not been much help in this, as he both had little clear knowledge and lied about what he knew, saying that the land of the halflings was near his own former home near the Gladden Fields. In June 3018, Sauron sent forth 2 assaults, one by orcs on the Woodland Realm, in the hopes of freeing Gollum, and one led by the Witch King on Gondor, to test the strength of Denethor. In the latter, after the taking of Osgiliath, the Nazgûl were told to begin the search for the ring. At this time, 7 ringwraiths, led by the Witch King, were stationed in Minas Morgul, while 2 were stationed in Dol Guldur. Sauron launched the attack on Osgiliath, on June 20, 3018, due to Gollum's capture previous year. On the evening before the attack, Faramir had a dream. A similar dream came to Boromir. Both Boromir and Faramir could understand little of these words, such as Imladris, Isildur's Bane, and Doom. They spoke to their father, Denethor, who was wise in the lore of Gondor. But he could only say that Rivendell, which is also known as Imladris, was a dale in the far north where the half-elven, Lord Elrond, lived. At the dawn of the War of the Ring, beginning with the attack on Osgiliath, Boromir was a commander. His company drove back the orcs and held the last bridge, and eventually they destroyed it behind them, to prevent the orcs from crossing the river. Only a remnant of Gondor's eastern force survived. After the eastern portion of Osgiliath was taken and the bridge broken, Sauron broke off the assault, ordering the Nazgul to begin their search for the ring. The same day, Sauron also launched an attack on Thranduil, with orders to the orcs to capture Gollum. He was guarded day and night, but the elves pitied him and allowed him to climb a tree that stood alone. When the elves were attacked by orcs, Gollum could escape in the confusion, earlier having refused to climb down the tree. The elves, accompanied by Thranduil's son, Legolas, drove off the orcs but were unsuccessful in recapturing Gollum. Thranduil sent Legolas to Rivendell to inform Elrond about Gollum's escape. In the attack on Osgiliath, Sauron let the Nazgul lead, for two purposes. First, he wanted to test the strength and preparedness of Denethor, which was greater than Sauron had hoped. Second, and more importantly, was to make it seem that the Nazgul was the vanguard of the army and merely a part of Sauron's war strategy. This way they could slip through without the wise thinking that the Nazgul was searching for the ring. They moved slowly, unclad and unmounted, therefore invisible to the eye. The Witch King led his companions over the Anduin. They passed through Anorion, over the Ent Wade and into the Wold. They reached the west shores of Anduin, a little north of Sarn Gabur, and there received horses and raiment that were secretly ferried over the river. They traveled north to find the Shire. A few days later they met with the Nazguls from Dol Guldur. They learned of Gollum's escape, and that no halflings dwelled in the Vales of Anduin. The Witch King, however, saw no better option and they headed north, hoping to come across Gollum. Avoiding the protection of Galadriel's ring, they passed between Lorien and the mountains. As the Black Riders were seen in the attack of Osgiliath, Saruman summons Radagast the Brown. Saruman told Radagast that he was willing to help Gandalf, and sent the Brown Wizard to seek him out at once. Gandalf, who had heard disturbing news about war in Gondor, met Radagast the Brown, on the Greenway. Radagast was sitting on the side of the Greenway with his horse near Bree, when Gandalf found him on his way to the village. Radagast warned Gandalf that the Nazgul were abroad, disguised as riders in black, and that they were seeking news of the Shire. He also gave him Saruman's invitation. It is not clear if Saruman actually knew that the Nazgul was looking for the Shire, or if it was a ruse he used to lure Gandalf to Orthanc. Through his jealousy towards Gandalf and his ever-growing pride and arrogance over the last decades, he had assigned spies earlier, thwarting Sauron's own spies, and to watch over all of Gandalf's movement. Saruman's intention was to seize the One Ring for himself, or at the very least stand as a vassal of the victorious Sauron. After he met with Radagast, Gandalf went to the Prancing Pony at Bree. Believing that he would not be able to return to Frodo in time, he wrote a letter, urging him to move as soon as possible for Rivendell, and seek someone called Strider, whose real name is Aragorn, with a riddle to identify him. Gandalf would then try to catch up with them when available. He also instructed Barlaam Butterbur, the innkeeper at the Prancing Pony, to send the letter to Hobbiton and to expect a Mr. Baggins that will come under the name of Mr. Underhill. He left the inn, but Barlaam would forget to send the letter. On 1st of July, Gandalf leaves Bree for Isengard. 4th of July, Boromir heads for Rivendell, seeking counsel about his and Faramir's dream. Soon thereafter, on 10th of July, Gandalf arrived at Isengard. At their meeting, Saruman at last revealed his desire for the One Ring. He offered to his old friend and helper that they take the ring for themselves and seize power from Sauron. Gandalf rejected this with horror, and was imprisoned by Saruman on the pinnacle of Orthanc. From the pinnacle of the tower, Gandalf could see that Saruman was gathering hordes of orcs and wolves in his pits and forges. In August 3018, all trace of Gollum is lost. It is thought that at about this time, being hunted, both by the elves and Sauron's servants, he took refuge in Moria, But when he had at last discovered the way to the west gate, he could not get out. About a month later, in September, having failed to find the Shire after nearly 2 months, the Black Riders returned to the Wold empty-handed. At the Wold, messengers from Sauron gives threats regarding Boromir leaving Minas Tirith, the deeds of Saruman, and of Gandalf's capture. Concluding that while none of the Wise had the ring yet, Saruman might know where it was, and the ringwraiths are ordered straight to Isengard, and that speed alone would now serve, secrecy must be abandoned. During his meeting with Radagast, Gandalf asked him for help, by letting all his friends, beasts and birds, bring news to Orthanc. A few days after the Nazgul set out for Isengard, Gwaihir, the Windlord, saw Gandalf at the pinnacle of the tower, as he was bringing news to Isengard, as instructed by Radagast. Gwaihir rescued Gandalf. He couldn't carry him to the end of the earth, but many leagues. Gandalf needed a steed, so Gwaihir suggested that they would aim for Edoras, for there the Rohirrim, the Horse Lords, dwell. Frodo worries about not having heard from Gandalf, as his birthday approaches. Some of his friends, Folco Boffin, Fredegar Bolger, Merry Brandybuck and Pippin Took, stay in Bag End and help him pack for his removal to Crickhollow in Buckland.